Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Ulan Yang, and we're back here with our last tier list. I will not be doing natives. I just don't see too much of a point in it, and also the natives are by far the category of units that I know the least about. But today we will be covering mercenaries. Now, we took a couple days off of the tier list making, just so that I could take like a 2 day I could take like 2 to 3 days to talk about explorers, which are like my favorite things in the game. I love me some explorers, and we got some good content out for explorers. I think I made like 3 total videos just for explorers. And so today we will be finishing the tier lists and talking about mercenaries. What will I do with my channel once I'm done making tier lists and my audience that comes here for tier lists stops coming here for tier lists? I don't know, but I'm gonna figure it out. um, I guess we will start with instead of going starting with the S class and then working my way haphazardly around. I think I'll just start with what's popular. I guess I don't know. I'll figure it out as I go. I don't really have a set way that I'm going about this. Let's start with the ones that we can for sure put in D, I suppose, and that is going to be the Little Bombard and the Napoleon gun. Napoleon gun is somewhat situational for USA, as they do have a free 2 Napoleon gun shipment, which, I mean, free mercenaries is never a bad thing. It also gives them the ability to train the Napoleon gun, which can fill a hole in their military if you don't have too many since they don't have the Falcon access to the Falconet. So the Napoleon gun can offer a halfway solution between the Falconet and the Gatling gun, where it can still perform well against infantry, but also perform well against buildings. Do I think it's worth it? No. The Napoleon gun is notably worse than the Gatling gun, and it's pretty much it's something I pretty much only train when I'm going pure mercenaries and just don't have a lot of wood on me because I have everybody on coin. As for the Little Bombard, it's down here for the same reason as the Napoleon gun, and that's just that there's very few occasions where it's viable to make these just because of how expensive they are. Napoleon guns cost 500 apiece, and Little Bombards cost 1,200. So they are absolutely nuts in the price department, and they will burn through your coin so fast. Alright, so I suppose after the cannons, we will go over the Musketeer equivalents. I think that's a pretty good place to start. There are 2 mercenary Musketeer equivalents, those being the Fusilier and the Highlander. Now, between the two, the Fusilier is similar to the Carolean in that it counters from range, and it counters cavalry at range, and the Highlander has a higher base attack, but its multiply against cavalry is in melee. They have somewhat similar costs and HP. The Fusilier is notably faster at 5.5 movement speed, and they're just overall solid. I will say, however, that the Highlander is notably better than the Fusilier. So I don't think he's great, just because both of them do have melee resistance as opposed to range, but the Fusilier has 10% as opposed to the Highlander, who has 40% melee resist. So combining all of these together, I do definitely think that the Highlander is the better option because he has a higher base attack with no multiplier against cavalry. And when we're talking about the Musketeer, we're talking about a unit that's just kind of an all-rounder that's made to fight everything, but particularly cavalry well. To at least some degree of effectiveness, and that is what the Fusilier provides. That is what the Highlander provides, as opposed to the Fusilier, who specializes in anti-cav a little bit more so, but suffers in the melee, which is where cavalry are going to try to get to you at. So we'll be putting the Highlander above the Fusilier. I suppose next we shall talk about the melee units, the melee anti-cav mercs, of which there are a few of them. The first is the Landsknechts. Now, the Landsknechts is kind of similar to a Skull Knight or a Samurai in that it's a dangerous unit that if it touches you, you will die. It has extremely high siege. They are a little slow. And they are also rather expensive. They're not the most expensive mercenaries out there, but they're not super cheap either. Um, they are available from the third age onwards, which is rather nice. Their shipments also give smaller quantities of Landsknechts, and as such, they can be picked off pretty quickly by good massive skirmishers. So I think we will be putting the Landsknechts probably at the top of C tier. There are definite uses for them. I have definitely seen. I've definitely trained them when I go with mercenaries. I have definitely seen Sweden players train them towards the late game, and they will just tear buildings down. They are definitely usable, much like the Fusilier. There are moments where you'll think to yourself, "Yeah, I'm going to make some Landsknechts," and it'll work out for you. But generally, there are better options for mercenaries, and it will be far from your first pick. Now, I guess we'll talk about the Ronin. The Ronin has more availability than the Landsknechts in the regard that every single European civ, and as well as USA and Mexico, have a card. For the Europeans, it's called theaters, and for Mexico and USA, it's called Dance Hall, that enables the Ronin. I do think they are worse than the Landsknecht. We're going to put them at the top of D tier with the cannons, not because of their stats, because their stats are in fact fantastic, but they have a couple problems with them. First is that they are very expensive. They cost 400 apiece, so for the same cost of getting 5 Ronin, you could get 4 Napoleon guns, and to be honest, I'd rather have the Napoleon guns. So maybe we will put them lower than the Napoleon gun in that case. But they cost 4 population apiece, and also despite being a like high stat melee Deefy boy who's supposed to tear everything he touches, they're not available until age 4. And by that point in the game, everybody has very large masses of units that can probably kite your Ronin to death. Combined with the fact that because they do take up more population, you'll have less of them, and there's just very rarely a time when I think to myself, yes, I would like to make Ronin. There's generally just anything else that I would rather make. Next, we will be talking about the Elmedi. The Elmedi will be going in the S tier. So the Elmedi is an age 4 locked mercenary, and they are mercenary lancers in that they have multipliers against infantry, and they definitely serve this role well, combined with the fact that they have 1100 base HP. These guys are absolute monsters on the battlefield. They are extremely tanky, and a shipment of Elmedi can be game deciding. It's just straight up. Once you get to the 4th age, you ship Elmedi, and it could win you the game just right then and there. That is how powerful the Elmedi is. The other one that we will be putting in S class, you guys probably already saw this coming, and that is the Mameluke. The Mameluke does far less damage than the Elmedi because it has no multipliers, but it has more HP. So this is like the tankiest a Hussar type unit can get. It's got like a pretty meh attack. I think it's got like 35, 36, 30, 38, somewhere around that range, but it has almost 1,500 base hit points. So if somebody makes Mamelukes, you're going to need not just anti-cav, but a lot of it in order to take them out, even if there's only like 5 of them. It can really screw around with you. So those will be the 2 cav that we'll the 2 heavy cavalry, specifically mercenaries, that we will be putting in the S class. Oh, I forgot to go over the Swiss pikemen. The Swiss pikemen, we're definitely gonna put it next to the Highlander in B tier, and that is because unlike the Landsknecht, while they are available at the same time as the Landsknecht, they do have better movement speed than the Landsknecht. And while they aren't absolute monsters where they just touch anything and it does, they do serve their purpose very well. They have higher base attack than the Halberdier, but still maintain the multipliers of the pikemen, which means that they do over 100 damage to cavalry. They have 22 base attack. You also get a lot more of them, so it's a lot harder for your opponent to pick them off one by one. They will end up lasting longer, and they also serve their role in having extremely high siege. Shipping Swiss pikemen is something that a lot of Dutch players in particular will find themselves doing, and I just think it's an overall very solid option. It's not the strongest, but it's a very solid mercenary where you see it and you're like, oh, well, I got to deal with that, you know. And it definitely has its presence. It definitely purveys its presence on the board. Now we're going to be finishing up the heavy cavalry. There are three more heavy cavalries. The first is the Stradiot. The Stradiot is, once again, just like the Swiss pikemen that we just talked about, available to the Dutch. There are a couple other civs that have Stradiots, but Dutch by far have the best Stradiot shipment. Specifically, the Stradiot shipment of the Dutch, we will be putting these at the top of B tier. The Stradiot shipment that's available to the Dutch is actually part of the advanced church card, which means you don't actually need any coin to send it. And then it provides a coin costing tech that researches itself in like 5 seconds at the church, which will give you, I think, 8 Stradiots. And the reason this is fantastic is because this card, the mercenary card, is essentially a delayed shipment that you can get pretty early in the game, and a lot of Dutch players will end up putting the advanced church card in their deck anyways. But what this means is that you can send your shipment for advanced church, and then you can wait to the perfect time for you to pop Stradiots on your opponents. The Stradiot pop for Dutch will always be perfectly timed because it can be microed down to within like 5 or 10 seconds. And just because of the utility specifically with the Dutch, we will be putting the Stradiot up here. It is not particularly special in any other notable way. It's just a hussar but stronger. Pretty much. That's all it is. It performs its job well, but it's nothing game winning or anything like that. And if you see these in the tavern, you might think to yourself, well, yeah, I could make that. Let me see if there's something better before I make them, though. And that's generally the thought process that goes in my head whenever I decide to make these when I'm doing mercenaries. Next, let's talk about the Jaeger. Jaegers will go in the S tier for sure. Jaegers are pretty cheap as far as mercenaries go. They cost, I think, 220 a piece. And they have very high range resist, very high attack. These are skirmishers that can go toe-to-toe with other skirmishers as well. They are a little frail. They're a little low in the HP department, so if your enemy's cav gets on them, they'll still perform better than other skirmishers, but they will die out fast. You need to protect your Jaeger shipment with your life, essentially. Sweden can train Jaegers by sending the card. They can just start training Jaegers straight out of their barracks after they send the card. And if you're lucky enough to get these in your tavern, then by all means, make them. They will serve you well. We don't have anything in the A tier, so let's change that by putting the Cannoneer in the A tier. The Cannoneer is the mercenary version of an obelisk gun, and it is by far the most unique among the mercenaries for 2 reasons. One, despite being a mercenary version of the obelisk gun, it is actually slightly weaker in stats, and the reason that it has slightly weaker stats is because, unlike the obelisk gun, this Cannoneer right here only costs 1 population. They have, I think, 34 attack to the obelisk gun's 40. But the fact that you can have 2 Cannoneers for every 1 obelisk gun means that you can mass these guys like no other. And the other thing that's really special about the Cannoneer is that it is the only mercenary unit that we see here that is available in the Second Age. That's right. If you are playing United States or Mexico, for example, and you're going with your outlaw builds, you build an Age 2 tavern, and you're about to start training some cuatreros or cowboys or banditos or whatever, and then you see Cannoneers, stop your build order that you are planning, stop making your cuatreros or whatever, and start making Cannoneers. They cost 140 coin, which will be the same cost as the cowboy after the cowboy nerf comes out, according to if the February pup notes do indeed hold stable. and it just causes cannoneers to be so incredibly massable. You can get so many of these guys in the early game, and they will just shred everything that looks at them. They do fall off pretty quickly just because they are an age 2 mercenary that has age 2 stats. They're pretty usable going into the third age, but past that, you really you probably won't be using cannoneers starting in the middle of the third age towards the end of the until towards the end of the game, possibly if you go up with a politician that the mercenary politician to 5 that boosts your mercenaries and will get the cannoneer back on track to where its stats are. But for its age 2 utility, specifically if you are running a outlaw or mercenary build, the cannoneer can be can like you if you see the cannoneer, it is absolutely viable to stop your build order and reorder it on the fly to accommodate for the cannoneer. They are that good. Next, we will talk about the Iron Troop. The Iron Troop is a better skirmisher unit than the Jaeger. You heard it here first, folks. The Iron Troops have, I think they have more HP than the Jaeger. They're very tanky, and they also have a whopping 60% range resistance. I'm pretty sure it's the highest range resistance of any non-cannon unit in the entire game. The Iron Troop also has a very high DPS. I think they have 25 base damage at base, which fires at 1.5 speed and still maintains good multipliers against heavy infantry. The Iron Troops are absolute monsters. You can even get them as treasure guardians on certain maps, which is fantastic. If you see an Iron Troop treasure, you need to go for it because you're essentially getting an Age 4 mercenary in the first age as a unit. And they are just absolute monsters. They are marred only by the fact, and this is the reason I put them below the Jaeger, they are marred only by the fact that they are blocked in Age 4. However, this is not true for everybody. The sole exception to this is China. China have an Age 2 card that enables the Iron Troop at their monastery starting in the third age. And it is actually something I plan to make a build order based around when the February update comes out and China gets their slight rework, because China also gets a card that boosts the attack speed of Iron Troops, which is already at 1.5. And China Mercenary build order is looking to be absolutely terrifying once they hit the third age and start spamming out the Iron Troops. They're even pretty cheap. I think they cost the same as the Jaeger. You know what? I think I might actually... I kind of want to put the Iron Troop with the Jaeger, but I definitely would... but the thing is, I'd either have to bring the Jaeger down to A tier, which is to say that it's worse than the Cannoneer, or I would have to bring the Iron Troop up to the S tier, which is to say that it's better than the Cannoneer, which I'm not really sure about either way, in all honesty, because the Cannoneer is available in Age 2, and it's just so good for what it does. So I'm a little torn there. I guess we'll just keep it as it is for now. But if you see Iron Troops, you need to. If you see Iron Troop treasures, go for them straight up. They're bomb. They're boss. I guess we'll finish up the heavy cavalry like I said we would do like 3 units ago. The Jet Lancer. The Jet Lancer is going to be a solid bottom of A tier, maybe top of B tier unit. And this is so the Jet Lancer it follows the same function as the Elmedi, where it is a Lancer type cavalry unit, where it has multipliers as a 4 times multiplier against all infantry with no other negative multipliers. So its damage is in fact higher than the Elmedi, and it is also available in the third age. But, and here's the thing, the Elmedi is tanky, and the Jet Lancer is not. The Jet Lancer, it has about 600 HP at base, which granted is a beefy amount of HP, but so is every mercenary unit. Every mercenary unit has a beefy amount of HP. And the Jet Lancer is just nothing special. You can train them, but they will go down to anti-cav pretty fast, and they're really expensive for what they do. The Elmedi is also expensive, but it also sticks around a lot longer. So for that reason, we will be putting the Jet Lance probably at the bottom of A, possibly top of B. The last heavy cavalry unit is the Harquebuser. Harquebusers. The British have a shipment of Harquebusers, and so do the Germans. Harquebusers are they're like Hackapellets but good. Sorry, just got something in my throat there. They're like Hackapellets but good. They have a fast, super high damage attack, and that's really the difference between the Harquebuser and the Hackapellet. Is while both of them are glass cannon cavalry, the Harquebuser actually has the damage to follow through with its declaration of "I am a glass cannon." I mean, this thing pumps out damage like no other. If you see Harquebusers, you need to get on them right away, because if they're allowed to stick around and do their damage, they will fuck up everything in sight. They are rather squishy. I think they have just under 300 HP. So you do need to be careful with your Harquebusers, but if used properly, Harquebusers are absolute nightmares to deal with. They have an extremely powerful close range attack that can just like two-shot things, and if you switch them into melee mode, they have a pretty respectable melee attack that has a splash effect on it. So the Harquebuser, whereas the Hackapellet was in D tier, we're going to be putting the Harquebuser above the Jet Lancer for sure. I think I will put the Jet Lancer at the top of B, actually. We're going to be putting the Harquebuser in the A tier, right below the Iron Troop. Let's get our 3 goons out of the way next. So the 3 goon mercenaries are the Black Rider, the Manchu, and the Yojimbo. The Black Rider, I am going to be putting in C tier. Now, the Black Rider is a fantastic unit, don't get me wrong, but stat-wise, all of the mercenaries are fantastic units. The Black Rider, however, is the only of the 3... It is the only one of the 3 mercenary Dragoon types that suffers from having melee resistance instead of ranged. Well, actually, it's not true. The Yojimbo also has melee resistance, but we'll get to the Yojimbo and what makes him special later. The Black Rider, it has melee resistance instead of range, and it doesn't have... He has a lot of range of melee resistance. He's got 40% melee resist, but he's got like no good hand attack capabilities to back to go with his 40% melee resistance. So you're basically not going to be blocking shit with him. The Germans do get a very solid amount of Black Riders through their Black Rider shipment. You do get quite a few of them. But in terms of doing their job of countering cavalry, the Black Rider is notably worse than either the Manchu or the Yojimbo. Speaking of the Manchu, we will be putting the Manchu in the A tier. If you are playing Russia, the Manchu is S tier. And if you are playing anybody else and you see Manchu in your tavern, you could be like, hell yeah, I'm going to make these Manchu. Manchu are fantastic units. They have very steady, strong DPS. They have good movement speed. They have range resist. They're pretty much everything you would want in a solid Dragoon unit. And they technically do their job of countering cavalry better than the Yojimbo. But the Yojimbo is going to be going in the S tier, even above the Jaeger. Yojimbo, Yojimbo are an age 4 locked unit. The Jaeger is age 3, and there is definitely a point to be made there. But specifically, the reason Yojimbo are fantastic, they have melee resist. They have 40% melee, just like the Black Rider. And they definitely don't counter the cavalry as hard as the Manchu, just because the Manchu can hit and run. The Yojimbo can do that as well. They do as good of a job of killing cavalry as the Manchu do. They just suffer from like having melee resistance instead of range. But the Yojimbo can make up for this by the fact that when you switch him to melee mode, the Yojimbo reveals his true identity, and that is not a goon. He is a fucking cuirassier. The Yojimbo, when they turn into melee, Yojimbo, by the way, are very tanky. They have over like 500 hit points, I think. When Yojimbo turn into melee, they get like 2 splash on their attack, and their melee attack has 35 damage, which is higher than the base cuirassier. And Yojimbo are amazing for that reason, because They'll destroy your cav, and then you think to yourself, oh, okay, cool. I'll just make some skirmishers to counter the Yojimbo because skirms counter your Jimbo. Nope, these motherfuckers will go into melee and fuck all of your skirmishers up in seconds. So then you think, okay, well then I need I need like some hand cavalry to help deal with it. And like, nope, because the Yojimbo will just go right back into range mode and kite your hand infantry all day. And as such, the Yojimbo are just nightmares to kill once they get massed. You will very rarely find yourself losing Yojimbo because they are so hard to counter, despite having melee resistance. And so that leaves the four. That leaves these four. The Indian Arsonist is a mercenary grenadier, and we will definitely be putting him below the Ronin. I used to like the Arsonist. I've seen some videos where they were used pretty well, but I had one game that was just a terrible experience with them, and that was a game I was playing against Germany, and I was using an outlaw strategy with United States. I had made quite a few cowboys, and as such, the Germany player had countered with quite a few more musketeers. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, I have mercenaries available at my tavern. I'm in the third age. Why don't I mass some arsonists? And so I made like probably a good 15 arsonists, and they got absolutely shredded by the skirmishers, which they are supposed to counter. And so instead of making the counter to skirmishers, which would be a grenadier, I matched the skirmishers by massing owl hoots, and the owl hoots just completely mopped the floor over all of the skirmishers and won me the game. The owl hoots even mopped up an army, mopped up a shipment of Jaegers by killing them pretty much all at the same time by everybody using their shotgun blast at once, and draining the entire mass of Jaegers all in one go. And it was a real treat to see. And I thought to myself, hot damn, I am never making arsonists ever again. So maybe they're more useful than I give them credit for, but because of that one traumatic experience I've had with Indian arsonists, which almost lost me the game, I am never training these guys ever again. I would rather train Ronin. The Barbary Corsair, we are going to put probably below the Fusilier. And that's just because there's nothing particularly special about the Barbary Corsair. It's a mercenary Rodolero, but it's not great at its job. Granted, it does do its job well, but one of the advantages to Rodolero is how fast they train and how easy they are to mass. And just because the Barbary Corsair is a mercenary unit, it's always going to be hard to mass. And massing Rodoleros is when they really start to take off in efficiency. So we're going to be putting the Barbary Corsair below the Fusilier for sure. And that leaves the Ninja and the Zuave. Ninjas, I don't know. I guess I'll just put them at the top of C, towards the top of C tier. Ninjas are probably the most situational mercenary in existence. Just because in order to make ninjas, your opponent has to be making pure mercenaries to make them worth it. Ninjas are mercenary spies, and they are mercenaries that counter other mercenaries super, super hard. But if your opponent is not making mercenaries, then why are you? There's no reason to ever train Yojimbo. That being said, when somebody pops an Almedi pop or a Mameluke shipment, that could be potentially game-winning, Ninja could be your potentially game-winning answer to them. So for that, I can't necessarily put them in D tier. We will put them below the Fusilier and the Landsknechts, though, for sure. They are very situational, but I think they have more use than the Barbary Corsair. Next is the Zuave. Zuave, I think, are a very underutilized unit. They recently got buffed in a couple of patches that reduced their cost from 400 to 350, which was definitely needed. I think they are not a 400. They are not a 400 coin unit. So the Zuave is a mercenary marine. So the Zuave has all of the tags of a skirmisher. But unlike skirmishers, it has a very high base HP and a very high attack with no multipliers to speak of. However, it is notably better than the Marine. It has higher movement speed, and it has 50% range resistance, in addition to a very high health pool. I think they have 320 at base, and they only cost 2 population each. So you can, if you get a massive Zuave out, they can tank like nothing you've ever seen before. These are easily the like tankiest of all of the infantry, and they even pump out a respectable amount of damage. But more importantly, these Suave are also very upgradable. Because they will specifically, this is the big one. I mean, granted, they'll still, like any other mercenary, they'll still get upgrades from cards that boost your units already. Like if you send skirmisher upgrades, they'll affect the Jaegers and whatnot. But the big one for Zuave is that they gain benefit from counter infantry rifling, unlike the Marine. So they can get something towards the ends of the, it's towards the very late game. If you have actually upgraded these, they can have like 60 attack. I think they have 43, 42, 43 at base. And if you can get, if you can therefore add a 2 times multiplier against heavy infantry, well, then they're going to be doing as much damage to heavy infantry as any other skirmisher, but they're also going to be hitting like a freaking truck to everything else too, because they have super high base attack. They are locked until age 4. And they do have very good synergy with United States, since the United States has a very good H5 Zuave shipment through the New York Age Up. And honestly, it actually makes me like really want to go with New York whenever I go age 5 with USA, especially since Illinois got nerfed. I find myself swapping between Florida for the hand cavalry upgrade, or New York for spamming Zuaves, as well as getting the cannon shipment, which is granted very good just because it buffs the rest of your mercenaries in attack. So we will be putting the Zuave. It's not as good as the Iron Troop. It's also not available till age 4, so I think it's worse than the Harkebuser. We'll be putting the Zuave at the very bottom of A tier. And this is my mercenary list. I'm sure you guys will have disagreed on something. You guys will have seen me place a unit somewhere and been like, oh, hell nah, you forgot about this. And I'll be like, yeah, I did, and sorry about that. Or I'll think, no, I kept that in mind. I just forgot to say it, and this is why I did something. And I love starting conversations with these tier lists. And I also love making new build orders. Who knows, maybe somebody will see this and they'll be playing United States and Mexico and they'll see Cannoneers in age 2 and they'll be like, hell yeah, I remember that Ulan Gaming guy said Cannoneers were really good. I'm going to make them, I'm going to try them out. And then who knows, maybe that'll, that might win them the game, and then they have a newfound respect for a new unit or build order. That's really what I'm trying to do here, is just raise awareness of not only units you need to watch out for, but potential new build orders that you could try out. And that's really the goal here. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time when I figure out what the hell I'm going to do with my channel now that all of the mercenaries are gone. Let me know what you guys want to see from me, actually. That might help me a little bit more, because at the moment, I don't really have any videos planned, so I'm probably just going to make... so I'll probably just go back to posting random games I play. Unless I get some requests for things you specifically want. Don't ask me for the native tier list. I won't do it. But let me know what you guys want for future videos. Thank you very much for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good day.